Is Ulrich here? Yep, he's here. Perfect. Great. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much to Tony in the last panel. We now have actually the last panel of the day. We have entitled it The New Responsibility of Shipping in the 2020s. We've heard lots of things today about the environment and decarbonization. You know, we have a lot of progress to be made ahead of us, and we're going to discuss some of those items on the panel. Our moderator is Audrey Charbonnier, Director of Shipping Finance, Standard Chartered. And on the panel, we have Ulrich Andersen, Chief Executive Officer of Golden Ocean. We have Achilleas Tasioulas, Chief Financial Officer of Gaslog Limited and Gaslog Partners. We have Simos Pariaros, Chief Administrative Officer of Eurodry and Euroseas. And we have Vasilios Maroulis, Managing Director and Head of Europe, Middle East and Africa, Shipping and Logistics and Offshore from Citi. Audrey, please.
Thank you, Kevin, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for sticking around. As partner sponsors, we do hope that you have found, the panels and the discussions engaging. I do believe Tony Foster was right earlier. They saved the best for last. And I'm not being biased, and I don't mean to offend any of the other panelists, but I am joined today by some of the industry's top leaders, market movers, the people who are making decisions that are driving change in the industry. I'm going to save my preamble in the interest of time and just jump straight into it. To start off, Ulrich, I don't mean to skip you, but it was just my train of thought. Achilleas, if you could tell us, what do you think is shipping's new responsibility in the 2020s, in addition, of course, to its responsibility to drive the international trade, move 80 to 90% of the world's cargo? What else is expected of us today?
Well, first of all, I mean, what you just said is not simple to do.
Yeah, that.
Okay, so shipping represents the 90% of global trade and is the lifeblood of the global economy. So the first responsibility is to continue doing that. But on top of that, it needs to continue doing that in an efficient, cost-effective way, also in a sustainable way, and focus on the investments in order to accelerate the decarbonization. In my view, actually, what we believe in Gaslog is that shipping needs actually to accelerate this path and not do the bare minimum and what regulations are saying. It needs to be at the front.
Yeah, it is a lot to shoulder. Ulrich, if I can come to you then, as one of the largest dry bulk carrier owners in the world, what are you doing with these newfound responsibilities, and how are your customers actually taking to these changes, or are they themselves asking for it?
Yeah, I think, as is being alluded to here, decarbonization is one of the biggest tasks and one of the most important tasks that we stand in front of. To Golden Ocean, this is an integral part of our strategy. We want to decarbonize because it is good for our shareholders, and it is also good for the environment. We are building a more resilient model. There's no doubt that decarbonization will change the ship owning model fundamentally. It is tied to the cost of capital. It is tied to the customer's buying criterion. Used to be price. Now we will start to see carbon also playing a role when deciding what vessels to fix. To, can you say, attract and retain talent into our industry. We need to have some visions and some ambitions on decarbonization. And finally, of course, we have investors that are also becoming more and more vocal. So decarbonization is here, and it is very important.
So if I could just add one more question to that. In terms of the changes that you are building into your business model, who is actually paying for it? Do you see your clients paying for it, or is it...
Right now, we are paying. The ship owners are lifting, can you say, that responsibility in the short term. We are investing, at least Golden Ocean, heavily into digitalization and upgrading our fleet in general to push our carbon footprint down. That is a cost we are taking. So we are taking those first steps and paying for them. But of course, the ultimate and end goal here is zero emission shipping. And that is not bill that the ship owners can shoulder. We have to collaborate across the value chain to begin with, but also we need funding from the outside, whether that funding comes from a higher price for our services or through a carbon tax or both. I don't know, but certainly we need funding to get to where we want to be. It's not something the ship owners can pay for alone.
Right. And in keeping with the ship owners, then if I could skip one down to Simos, based on what Achilles and Ulrich have shared, and with the regulations largely being pinned on the ship owners, do you think the right party has been held responsible for what is needed going forward? And if so, if you don't think so, who do you think it should be in addition to the ship owners?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation and for giving us the opportunity to touch upon such a sensitive and important issue that affects our quality of life and probably the fate of the planet in the decades to come. Now, to touch on your question, I think that the responsibility should lie among all parties involved in the process, from us owners to the authorities who should regulate accordingly, but very importantly also direct funds to research and development that would bring the transition cost down to levels that make economic sense for us owners to invest in the new technologies. The financiers' role is also very important, who should also encourage and help those who direct their investments in the right assets. But at the end of the day, it is very important that the consumers who will pay this transition bill also are aware of what it involves and also make the right choices as far as what they buy, because at the end of the day, they pay the bill. But I would also like to make one comment, which is, I believe, very much related to the whole process. I don't see that all these targets that have been set by the various authorities are feasible. I don't think that our industry can achieve this kind of emission reductions within the dates that have been set by the various authorities. And the most important thing is for us to invest more in the transition process, is to bring this cost down. The soonest the Green Bill goes down, the soonest the transition will come.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether over the course of today, the messaging has been, we need to deliver, and if not, do more. But I take your point in terms of it will take time. Ulrich, again, just sticking to the ship owners topic for a second. If I can come back to you in terms of, there's been a large emphasis on our discussions, even over the course of today, on carbon emissions, since it's a heavily regulated industry. Do you think that the expectations or the responsibilities are widening beyond just, carbon emissions? Could they also, or have they started to look into what cargo you're trading? As an example, for coal, do you see your investors say, try to reduce the amount of trade that you do?
I think rightly so, the focus is on emissions. It's what really moved the needle. Having said that, certainly in the last 12 months, maybe 18 months, we have heard more and more questions. Are you carrying coal? What is your policy on that? I think maybe now, given the developments in Ukraine, the world has gotten a little bit of an eye-opener on the importance of coal to tackle the energy. So I assume that that will postpone. It will postpone that discussion, but it is a relevant discussion. In Golden Ocean, we also have discussion. This is something we want to do in the future. We have decided that for the time being, we will transport coal, but it is definitely something that we will have to address as time progresses. I mean, we're not tone deaf, and we understand that this is important. We all like to see coal having a smaller part of the energy mix, certainly, but we also have to be realistic. And to put things in perspective, we can talk about Euro. Obviously, we need to to bring down the coal consumption. We are trying to do that, but right now we are importing more than we did last year. Secondly, we look to China, we look to India. China, for instance, consumes 4.1 billion tons of coal per year. They import around 300 million, so kind of fractions of what is seaborne. So yeah, it is definitely something that is coming. We also will address that going forward, but for the time being, we have decided to continue carrying coal and focus on what has also been the main topic today of bringing down emissions, because it's something that we can see has a direct impact on, partly on our own, can you say, bunker consumption, but also for the greater good, whereas moving coal is not really moving the needle.
Yeah. Vasilios, then from a lender's perspective, do you see the scope expanding beyond what we see environmentally tangible carbon emissions, or do you cover, in addition to cargo, perhaps ship recycling, the human capital aspect, labor practices? How does that factor into your decision making? Is it coming in?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, thank you. And I do fundamentally believe, and I think we at Citi do as a whole, that this transition, and I want to put it up as a preamble, is one of the single largest opportunities this industry has seen for a very long period of time. Now, some will be clearly winners, some will be losers, but at the same point in time, is it a fundamental opportunity for this industry? It is. I think the scope has, of course, begun with the ship owner. It is the owner of the specific asset class. There are the Poseidon Principles, which we will continue to, and that's the guiding principles for us in terms of how we do business. We do it on a portfolio basis, and therefore we are able, as financiers, to be able to say that our portfolio needs to be going down the specific path that we have committed to as an institution, but at the same point in time, we do have totally different clients, and therefore can decide that for one specific client, if they want to proceed with a specific financing, then we will accommodate with a portfolio view. So all in all, our portfolio will continue to follow the Poseidon Principles trajectory in whichever one it is, which ultimately is the one that the industry needs to follow, right? So it's not an arbitrary, sort of totally different requirements to what ultimately our clients need to do. So I think, all in all, indeed, it has begun in a specific way, but increasingly, the owners that follow that path will be rewarded. I am certain of it. You see it with the Sea Cargo Charter. Pretty soon, it's not going to be the financier that will be saying, what are you doing? It's going to be the client that is actually paying for the charters. Mm-hmm. So if you're not getting to where if you're not doing what they should be doing in terms of, because Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 is coming, and that's for sure. So we're seeing it as a global institution with all our fundamental, key clients, like very large institutions, which this is where they're going, this is where they're focusing. Pretty soon, they will be saying, I want my cargo not to be going on these vessels. Why? Because I need to be representing from a Scope 3 point of view, that I'm meeting my goals. So all in all, I think, indeed, a lot of discussion with regards to what the requirements are from an owner point of view, but I think the owners that go down that path embrace it, and I do fundamentally believe, as I said, it is one of the largest opportunities that we have seen with regards to this industry. And from an owner's point of view, they will be rewarded, and you're seeing it across the board. So that's a few.
Yeah, that makes sense. Achilles, if I can come back to you, how does it feel to be on the right side of history? Do you see a mindset shift and an acceptance of oil and gas as a critical piece to the transition story?
Well, it feels nice to start.
Finally.
Finally. It took us some time to start seeing this in a practical way and an improved market. It is true that the LNG is still a fossil fuel, but on the other hand, it has significantly lower emissions, and it can be produced at scale, and it is pretty easy to transport it. On the other hand, with renewables, for example, we have challenges because we don't have this at scale and we cannot transport it. So we do need to reduce emissions, and LNG plays a key role as a transition fuel on our final target. I'll use an example from Shell's presentation where it was showing that 20% increase on the coal to gas switch in Asia represents the whole emissions of Germany. So the impact that LNG can have is significant. On the other hand, with the situation today in Europe and the disruption that we see on the energy, there is a serious underinvestment of LNG, and we need to fix that.
So not that you would be biased in any way, but can LNG do it alone? Or is it going to be a joint transition story between hydrogen, methanol, ammonia?
Well, I'll surprise you. It's a joint effort together with new technologies, and this is really the meaning of the transition fuel. Today, the way we see it, it is alone because, as I said, in terms of scale of production, the ability to transport it and use it, it is available, readily available. But on the other hand, new technologies need to come up and develop, and it is a matter of timing, a matter of capital investment, and consistency on energy generation. The good thing with LNG is that you can burn it with a mix of other fuels to reduce the overall emissions. But we need the technological solutions that we currently don't have. Hydrogen, for example, is difficult to transport. You need to do that at minus 250 degrees. Potentially, it will dominate the industrial demand. Green hydrogen, for example, probably you can produce locally and use it locally. Ammonia, on the other hand, you can transport it, but it's very dangerous if it goes out to the environment. So, as I said, it's a matter of new technologies, investments that need to be made, and availability of the products. Until we get there, we need the LNG, and gradually, hopefully, with a mix of the right fuels, we will achieve what we need to achieve.
Okay. So just staying on that topic then, I mean, we've seen a rise in new build orders with dual capabilities. I know Alrik, Achilles, you both have some on the order book, which we'll speak about later. But what is next? How do you go from capability to operation? Who is responsible for supplying the bunker, upgrading the port infrastructure, developing the technology that you say is missing? I mean, are ship owners going to be responsible or expected to establish their own e-methanol terminals, or is this going to lead to more consolidation in the market? I mean, I'm opening this one to the floor, so feel free to...
I think it's going to be a mix. I mean, you see, for example, the establishment of green corridors, for example, and that element of it is going to be an interesting sort of like first point of view, and there are many governments that have signed up to that in terms of committing that they will create that. Then, you know, there will be an element of subsidies, of course, and everything else. So I think all in all, it is a collective effort. And it's not going to happen just the ship owner or, you know, having to foot the bill or having to proceed with the necessary actions to create that. I think COP26 and everything that is increasingly, and yes, the terrible events that are happening in Europe at the moment is probably have has pushed the pause button to a certain extent because clearly the needs need to be satisfied. But at the same point in time, there is an element of stabilization in terms of like this is happening, and therefore, yes, we have to proceed to make sure that we don't have energy shortfalls. But at the same point in time, this whole trend is not really a trend. It is what is required by holistically society, and increasingly we're seeing the consumer is willing to look at it in terms of additional cost once they know what they are buying. So if you can quantify it, then that is why digitization is extremely important in this process in order to be able to quantify what it is that the owner and the corresponding, of course, cargo operators are proceeding to offer to the consumer. The consumer is willing to pay, and I think increasingly you're seeing so many initiatives which will assist that process.
That good segue to my next question in terms of financial incentive. I think, Ulrich, you mentioned earlier in terms of the expectation of your investors. Previously, being sustainable, being green was required to tap a new set of investors to increase your investor pool or your liquidity base. Now it looks to be what is required to retain your investors. Do you see that as being the case for you? For you or for Achilles?
Well,
Anyone on the panel?
It's certainly getting more and more important, but it's not the only factor. I mean, investors would look at the quality of the management, they would look at the track record, the price, of course, it's always a very important point. If an investor, the price that an investor has to enter, it's always probably the most important point. But yes, it's gaining more and more importance as time passes.
And would you like, Simos, would you like to share what Eurodry and Euroseas is doing from your standpoint?
Sure. Euroseas and Eurodry have both adopted ESG policies, and Euroseas, more particularly, has been engaged in a very ambitious new building program, which we believe fully covers our responsibility in that area, but equally importantly, can provide superior returns for our investors. I mean, for us, that was a huge capital expenditure. In a period where we're seeing the biggest order book in the container sector, but we still believe, and I believe we will soon see the results of that, that the investments will be very good for our investors, all these new building investments.
Yeah. Sorry, Ulrich, I think I cut you off earlier.
Yeah, no, I don't think I go into any investor meeting today without being asked about our decarbonization strategy. And I think the beautiful thing here to remember is that decarbonization means lower bunker consumption, which means in turn lower cost. So it is really good for everyone. In Golden Ocean, we are very focused on plucking first and foremost the low-hanging fruits, of which there are plenty, investing in upgrades of the vessel, low friction paint, better hull maintenance, rolling out sensors on all our vessels to get live data stream into our performance system so we can see how the vessels are performing. All of these initiatives we believe can actually lower bunker consumption or fuel bill with low double-digit numbers, which is pretty substantial. So there's a lot to start with that we can go out and do just like that. Then of course there's the next phase, which would be, can you say, some bigger steps that we need to be taken. I don't want to spoil the party, but I think LNG, with the prices where they are today, is a bit of a difficult to see how that's going to be the transitional fuel. But there are other options out there as well. But of course, bigger measures need to be done, whatever they may be. I don't have the answers today, but we need to go that way and to start walking.
Just what here, and to use what Vasilis mentioned before, that it is a joint effort, and investments will come through incentives from governments, through a clear regulation that assigns the responsibility in a clear way to everybody, and everybody knows what to expect and on what it is investing. We see, which is what happened with GasLog and the BlackRock transaction, and in other cases last year, we see private money coming into the industry, investing on this direction. It was one of the key reasons that BlackRock invested in GasLog, the LNG. So we also see products developing in the capital markets or in the bond markets with sustainability bonds, or we see the loans developing with ESG clauses on the margin. All this need to accelerate and boost the investment cost of the transition, which is going to be high.
Yeah, I think it is a joint effort. And I think the previous panel also said, it is a transition, and, at the same point in time, there are specific industries that, it goes from A to B, and, the previous panel was saying B needs to be ready in order for you to move. It's not going to be like this. You need to be, the energy mix, everything is required at the moment for a lot of reasons, so therefore nothing can be excluded. But at the same point in time, the direction of travel is clear, and for those that do not see it, they're clearly going to be part of the losers, in my humble opinion, and that's because society is shifting that way. And I think in terms of what is being done, there are a lot of clever people focusing on this, and I think therefore joint solutions will be provided. And whilst you're seeing the direction of travel, you're also seeing an acceleration of where the capital is going once you can show solutions, not only solutions which are, net zero, if you wish, but also solutions that clearly show a reduction, and therefore being able to go towards the path that is required.
So it does seem like there is a long road ahead of us, and there is a lot of CapEx that's going to be required to get us to that point. Is there anything that we can be doing in the interim that will help offset some of the carbon emissions that weren't otherwise captured? So take, for example, carbon credits. I know we had an earlier panel on this just now, but what is your view? Is there anything else that we can look at? I think Golden Ocean does look to be interested in carbon credits. Is that something that you are pursuing in the interim?
Yes, it is something we're using to make the, investment into decarbonization even more attractive. I think at the moment, as I said earlier, the investments in themselves make sense, so why would you not do them if you can put a new propeller vortex on your vessel and have a payback time of, let's say, 10, 12 months, why would you not do it? You would always want to do it. But if you can afterwards go and claim carbon credits, which we are trying, and then use those to offset further or sell them in the voluntary market, it's of course new revenue streams, and also leading to what you're saying, okay, this transition is a major opportunity. But carbon credits is it's not the reason why you're doing it. It's just a little it's just a little kicker. The final goal is to build a resilient model, which is ultimately what your clients are demanding, and that is going to be shipping that is lower emitting, because there's going to be a carbon price, as I say, whether it's a worldwide carbon price or it's each individual company that puts a price on carbon, that will come, and that day you will have lower bunker consumption, which is good for you, but you will also be competitive because you have lower carbon emissions, so you save that as well. So it's as you say, it's just started going in one direction. In Golden Ocean, we don't think so much necessarily about IMO or other trajectories. We don't necessarily find them ambitious enough, but we just give it everything we got, and then we'll figure out how to get to the final goal at the end of the day. We don't know yet, but we know what we can do and what we can control, and that is what we are attacking now. And then we'll have to figure out later if the price of LNG drops or something else materialized, then we'll have to pursue those solutions. But there's plenty we can do already now in the short term, and that's what we're trying.
Does anyone else in the panel have a view? Is there anything else that we can be doing or you're doing to kind of get us at least transition, be covered in between? Simos, maybe on your side?
I'm not sure, you mean, many little things we can do, but at the end of the day, it has to make economic sense. Otherwise, I mean, we have a responsibility to our investors to do things that have economic sense. So anything that has economic sense, we are very keen on doing it.
I think from most owners' point of view, we would like to have a level playing field. So getting some, can you say, clarity on legislation and yeah, what we can expect going forward is a good starting point. We don't know completely the IMO 2023 regulations. We're only going to find out in June, which is obviously very close to the commencement of said regulations. So there are, can you say, a lot of uncertainty, which is why we are saying why, you know, we are pro, for instance, a carbon tax. It's pretty easy to enforce and pretty easy to understand, and it is, as long as you plow that, can you say, proceeds back into the industry and use that for research and development or for other initiatives that can help the transition, then we think it's a good starting point at least.
Yeah, from our point of view, clearly we are financiers, and therefore we're not there to say what the solutions are. You know, we hear from, you know, the market what people are doing at the same. So, if there is a clearly, you know, regardless if it's just steps towards that direction, and they are carefully thought of and can be implemented, and you know, we are there to listen, and ultimately for our clients, you know, there to support them throughout this journey.
So I'm conscious of obviously client management, but on that note, Vasilios, do you think that given our position as providing capital, that we should be trying to direct or making a little bit more aggressive conditions as part of our funding?
No, we're not there to push the direction. We're there to say what we as an institution have committed to, right? And what we want with regards to our portfolio. But we are definitely not going to be there to, you know, effectively say to our clients what they should or should not do. The decisions are theirs, and ultimately, for decisions that make sense, we are there to support them. And if we are, of course, seeing capital that has been extended to specific clients, which, of course, make us shift in terms of our commitments, then that is a discussion to be had in terms of redirecting capital to clients that assist us. But we're definitely not going to be there to effectively push or clearly indicate, if you wish, of where what the client should be doing. That is a totally, and I do believe that our clients, you know, are of that quality that, you know, have their own views regardless of what we would say anyway.
I have to caveat, Standard Chartered is not enforcing any specific rules on our clients. I was just curious, you're taken, I guess to your point, it's also a matter of client selection. So you would select clients that you believe, you know, have a sustainability transition story. So at least that's from our standpoint. Before I go to my last question, I think, Kevin, you said I have a few minutes. Maybe open it to the floor first in case there are any questions for the...
Yeah, John. Yes. Joe Farakis, all about shipping here in London. It was a fantastic event. The first of its kind is really important. I enjoyed your comments. I'll stick to Mr. Pariaros' point about the regulators. My point is, who regulates the regulators? And secondly, I go to Mr. Tashilas' point about agreeing that LNG is a fuel. I think the transition period is too long. And I'm afraid that somebody behind doesn't like that if we opt for the alternative source of energy, big money will change hands. What do you have to say about this?
Sorry, I didn't hear very well the last part of the question.
I said that if we opt for the alternative source of energy, for example, wind power, a very big organization awarded the best ship 4 years ago, the vessel with the new wind propulsion system, right? So we have to do the improvements of air, like the sails, you know, we went to steam and then to diesel, etc. We are back going to something which is very healthy for everybody, which is the wind power. But this is an alternative source, it's not a renewable, it's an alternative. It's a big difference between the renewables and the alternatives.
Indeed.
Correct?
Correct.
So why don't we opt? In my view, that's why I'm making a nicely provocative question, and I'm saying that if we opt for this, for the alternative sources, big money will change hands. Let them change then. We need to see the change for bettering off our society and our environment, our health.
But right now, these investments cannot be supported. I mean, we are living in a world with huge energy costs. You're saying that, okay, we direct our investments, like you mentioned. Who's going to pay for that cost? People will starve. It's not that simple. You think we as owners, we don't want the best environment for everybody?
Only the owners worldwide they want to change. The owners, they want to change. It's the producers and the traders that they don't want to change. To put it bluntly.
You should ask them then.
I think that's why we said that
Thank you.
it's a joint effort. So it involves the suppliers, it involves the owners, the banks, and at the end of the day, the consumers, actually. And I mean, it's really about the consumers that have the power to make the change if they realize what it is at stake and decide for themselves. And actually, the new generations.
I fully agree with what you just said, Achilles. It is the consumers that need to actually get behind that.
Okay, we have another question here.
This is to John, to forward what you were saying. I don't think the oil companies are really backing up wind sales and motor sales, etc., because it's the obvious. It doesn't support them. So to back in the green energy with wind propulsion is a very debatable topic because it doesn't line the pockets of the people that it needs to line. And that's a very, provocative subject to talk about.
Have you been in a Mediterranean country like Spain, Italy, or Greece, or Turkey? You see on the top of the top roof of the houses that solar power has gone to the major companies that like
Let's move on, John. Let's move on. Okay, any other questions, please? Any other questions? Because we're out of time. Then I think we're good. So, Audrey, and to the panel, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that's the end of the conference. I would like to hand over to Abhishek again, just to close the conference. In the meantime, I would like to thank you very much for coming along, and we're very much looking forward to an even bigger conference next year. Abhishek, please.